The desperate signal director Zara Theln stood before the massive viewing screen in the Krillian Research Council chambers, watching her civilization die one world at a time. The plague they called the Silence had already consumed 12 of their outer colonies, leaving nothing behind but empty cities and the haunting quiet of extinct worlds. The disease was unlike anything in recorded galactic history. It attacked the neural pathways of any sentient being, slowly shutting down higher brain functions while leaving the body intact. Victims would lose their ability to speak first, then their capacity for complex thought, until finally they became living shells that simply forgot how to survive. The infected would wander aimlessly until they collapsed from starvation or exposure, their minds lost to an endless grey void. Director, called Dr. Marin Vask, her chief medical researcher. His usually pristine white fur was disheveled, and his 4 eyes showed the exhaustion of weeks spent fighting an impossible enemy. The Volante delegation has transmitted their final report. Zara's crystalline skin shifted from blue to a darker purple, reflecting her growing despair. The Volante were considered the most advanced medical civilization in the galaxy, their biotechnology surpassing even the legendary healing chambers of the ethereal collective. If they had failed, hope seemed truly lost. What did they conclude? The Silence appears to be both organic and artificial. It behaves like a virus, but has mechanical components that adapt to every treatment we attempt. Their quantum healing matrices had no effect. The plague simply evolved past each intervention within hours. Zara closed her 6 fingers into fists. 3 months ago, the Krillian Empire had controlled 47 star systems and boasted a population of nearly 2 billion souls. Now, only the core worlds remained, and even they showed signs of infection spreading through the population centers. What about the Synthery Collective? She asked, though she already suspected the answer. Their nanomedical swarms were consumed by the plague and turned against their own creators. The entire Synthery medical station had to be evacuated and destroyed before the infection could spread to their home systems. The irony was bitter. The Krillians had spent centuries developing their reputation as master diplomats and negotiators, building bridges between dozens of different species and creating the most stable alliance the galaxy had ever known. Now, when they needed help the most, even their closest allies were pulling back in fear. Director, interrupted Communications Officer Lyra Sten, her young voice carrying a tremor of barely controlled panic. We're receiving reports from the capital. The infection rate has increased by 30% in the last 6 hours. Medical facilities are overcrowded, and we're running out of time. Zara finished for her. Through the viewing screen, she could see the sprawling metropolis of New Krillia below, the city that had once pulsed with the constant movement of hover. Vehicles and commercial transports now showed large dark sections where entire districts had fallen silent. The geometric spires that had stood as monuments to Krillian achievement for over 1,000 years were beginning to dim as their caretakers succumbed to the plague. Director Dr. Vask spoke again, his voice heavy with reluctance. There is one option we haven't tried. Speak freely. We could send out a general distress signal, not just to the major civilizations, but to every species with sufficient technology to receive long-range communications. Perhaps some smaller civilization has encountered something similar, or has developed treatments we haven't considered. Skin shifted to a skeptical grey-green. The minor civilizations, most of them haven't even developed faster than light travel. What could they possibly offer that the Volante or Synthery couldn't provide? I don't know, Vask admitted, but we're facing extinction. Maybe it's time to try approaches that seem impossible. The director looked around the chamber at her remaining staff. Once, this room had been filled with representatives from dozens of worlds, their voices joining together in the complex harmonies that guided Krillian decision-making. Now, only 7 individuals remained, the survivors of a council that had once numbered in the hundreds. Prepare the emergency broadcast, she decided. Send it on all frequencies, all languages, every channel we can access. Make it clear that we're willing to share our entire technological database with any species that can provide assistance. Officer Sten nodded and began working at her station. Message prepared, Director. Shall I include our current situation? Reports, everything. Let them know exactly how desperate we are. Pride is a luxury we can no longer afford. The signal went out that hour, racing across the galaxy at faster than light speeds. It would reach every developed civilization within days, carrying the Krillian plea for help to hundreds of different species. Most would likely ignore it, unwilling to risk exposure to a plague that had already defeated the galaxy's greatest. Medical minds. For 2 days, the only responses came from allies expressing their sympathy, but offering no real assistance. The ethereal collective sent meditation techniques that had no effect on the plague. The trade guilds offered to evacuate key personnel, but only to isolated quarantine stations, where they would remain until the infection burned itself out. On the 3rd day, something unexpected happened. Director Officer Sten called out, her voice carrying a note of confusion. We're receiving a response from the Outer Rim territories. Grid reference 7749, a system called Sol. Zara frowned. The Outer Rim was largely unexplored space, populated mostly by primitive species that had barely achieved nuclear technology. What kind of response? They single quotes They're offering to help. The transmission is from the 3rd planet, a world they call Earth. The species identifies itself as humans. Dr. Vask accessed his xenological database. I have minimal information, carbon-based, bilateral symmetry, single-star system. Their technology level appears to be early space age at best. No faster-than-light capability, no energy weapons, no quantum computing. What exactly are they offering? Zara asked. Sten replayed the message. A strange, flat voice filled the chamber, speaking in a language the translation matrix struggled to process. Krillian, command. This is Dr. Sarah Chen of the Earth Medical Research Consortium. We received your distress call regarding the biological plague affecting your population. We understand your situation is critical. We are preparing a medical team for immediate dispatch. Our estimated arrival time is 72 hours. Stay strong. The chamber fell silent. Dr. Vask was the first to speak. 72 hours. Director, it would take our fastest ships months to reach their system. They claim to have no faster-light technology, yet they promise to arrive in 3 days. Before Zara could respond, space itself seemed to ripple outside the viewing screen. Energy readings spiked across all sensors as reality bent and twisted in ways that defied every law of physics the Krillians understood. A tear opened in space-time, glowing with brilliant white light. From this impossible aperture, ships began. To emerge, they were unlike any vessels in the galactic database. Angular, aggressive-looking, craft built from metals that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The ships moved with precise formation, their designs suggesting a species that had learned to build for functionality rather than beauty. How many vessels? Zara managed to ask. 47 ships, ranging from small research craft to massive hospital ships, Sten reported, her voice filled with amazement. Director, I'm reading medical equipment configurations I don't recognize and energy signatures that shouldn't be possible with their supposed technology level. A new transmission arrived, clear and strong. Krillian Command, this is Captain Marcus Steele of the Earth Medical Fleet. We're requesting permission to establish orbital medical stations and deploy research teams to your surface. We understand time is critical, so we're prepared to begin operations immediately upon your approval. Zara stared at the impossible fleet hanging in space above her dying world. Everything she knew about these humans suggested they should be centuries away from such capabilities. Yet here they were, offering help when the galaxy's most advanced civilizations had given up. Dr. Vosk, she said quietly, prepare to receive their delegation. And Dr. Vesk, Director, it seems we have much to learn about what's possible. As the human ships moved into position around New Krillia, Zara allowed herself the first spark of hope she had felt in weeks. Perhaps salvation could come from the most unexpected sources. Perhaps the species that seemed least capable of helping would prove to be exactly what they needed. The viewing screen showed human shuttles beginning their descent toward the planet's surface, carrying with them either the salvation of the Krillian people or another cruel disappointment in a series of failures. But something in the efficient way the humans moved, the confidence in their communications, and the impossible fact of their arrival suggested that these beings from a distant star might possess something that all the advanced civilizations lacked: the ability to find solutions where others saw only problems. Within hours, the first human medical teams would be walking the corridors of Krillian hospitals, bringing with them perspectives shaped by a world and evolution that no other species could understand. The question was whether their alien approach to medicine could succeed where the galaxy's greatest minds had failed. Director Zara Theln watched the human shuttles land and realized that her people's fate now rested in the hands of a species that shouldn't have been able to help them, but somehow had found a way to try. The human solution, Sarah Chen stepped out of the human medical shuttle onto the crystalline landing platform of New Krillia's primary medical facility. The city around her told a story of gradual collapse. Magnificent spires stood dark and empty, their geometric beauty now serving as monuments to a dying civilization. She had spent the 3-day journey studying everything the Krillians had shared about their plague, and what she found both fascinated and horrified her. The silence was indeed a unique pathogen, but her human perspective revealed patterns that other species had missed. Dr. Chen, Director Zara Theln, approached, her crystalline skin displaying nervous purple hues. Welcome to New Krillia. I must admit, we are puzzled by your arrival. According to our databases, your species lacks the medical technology that our greatest allies have already tried. Sarah smiled, an expression that seemed to confuse the Krillian director. That's exactly why we might succeed, Director. Sometimes the biggest advantage is not knowing what's supposed to be impossible. Captain Marcus Steele joined them, his weathered face showing the confidence of a career military officer who had seen impossible situations resolved through human ingenuity. Director Thelm, we've brought 47 ships and over 3,000 medical personnel. We're ready to begin immediately if you'll give us access to your research data and infected populations. Captain, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but perhaps you don't understand the scope of this crisis. The silence has defeated treatments developed by civilizations with millions of years of medical advancement. The Volante tried quantum cellular regeneration. The Synthery deployed nanomedical swarms that can rebuild tissue at the molecular level. What could your people possibly attempt that hasn't been tried? Dr. Chen opened a case filled with equipment that looked primitive compared to the gleaming Krillian medical devices around them. We're going to try something different, Director. We're going to treat this plague like it evolved on Earth. Over the following hours, Sarah's team established research stations throughout the medical complex. Their approach baffled the Krillian doctors. Instead of focusing on the plague's advanced adaptive mechanisms, the humans began studying its basic biological functions. Dr. James Rodriguez, the team's pathobiologist, spent hours examining plague samples under microscopes that seemed crude by galactic standards. Sarah, look at this. Everyone's been focusing on how this thing adapts to treatment, but nobody's asked why it needs to adapt at all. What do you mean? Think about it. This plague is supposedly artificial, right? Biomechanical hybrid designed to be the perfect weapon. But perfect weapons don't need to evolve. They're already perfect. Sarah studied the data Rodriguez was showing her. You're saying the adaptation isn't a feature of the design. It's a survival mechanism because the plague is imperfect. Exactly. And if it needs to adapt to survive, that means it has weaknesses its creators didn't account for. Meanwhile, Dr. Lisa Park was taking a completely different approach. She had requested samples of uninfected Krillian neural tissue and was comparing them to her extensive database of Earth organisms. The neural pathway structure is similar to what we see in Earth's cephalopods, she reported to Sarah. Octopi, specifically. Complex neural networks with distributed intelligence. What's your point, Lisa? On Earth, we have parasites that specifically target cephalopod nervous systems. They've been fighting this evolutionary war for millions of years. What if the principles that work against Earth's neural parasites could be adapted for this plague? Director Thelm had been observing the human research methods with growing confusion and concern. Dr. Chen, I don't understand your approach. You're comparing our neural structure to primitive Earth creatures. You're studying basic biological functions instead of the plague's advanced technological components. This seems ... random. Sarah looked up from her microscope, her eyes bright with excitement. Director, every other species that's tried to cure. Your people has approached this as a technological problem. They've tried to out-technology the plague, but this isn't just technology, it's also biology, and biology follows rules that technology doesn't always account for. I don't follow. Your plague adapts to treatments, right, but adaptation takes time and energy. On Earth, we learned that sometimes the best way to fight an adaptive enemy isn't to hit it harder, it's to hit it in ways it doesn't expect, faster. Then it can adapt. Dr. Chun's team had been working for 18 hours straight when they made their breakthrough. Dr. Rodriguez was analyzing the plague's adaptive responses when he noticed something strange. Sarah, come look at this. The plague's adaptation mechanism has a pattern. It responds to threats by building defenses based on the type of attack it encounters. Energy-based treatments trigger energy-resistant mutations. Chemical treatments cause chemical resistance. We knew that already. But look at this. When I expose it to extracts from Earth organisms, it doesn't adapt properly. It tries to build defenses against threats that don't exist in its programming. Sarah stared at the data, her mind racing. It's not just that the plague doesn't recognize Earth biology. It's that Earth biology doesn't follow the rules the plague was designed to counter. She immediately called Captain Steele and Director Thelm to the laboratory. We think we've found something. The plague was designed to fight galactic civilizations that follow certain biological and technological patterns. But Earth life evolved. In isolation from the galactic community, our biological processes are different enough that the plague's adaptive systems can't properly counter them. Explain, Director Thelm demanded. Dr. Park presented her findings. On Earth, we have organisms that have been fighting neural parasites for hundreds of millions of years. They've developed biochemical defenses that are completely different from anything used by galactic medical technology. You're proposing to treat our people with primitive Earth organisms? Not exactly, Sarah replied. We're proposing to treat them with synthetic compounds based on Earth biochemistry, modified to be compatible with Krillian biology, but maintaining the fundamental properties that make them alien to this plague. Captain Steele stepped forward. How quickly can you synthesize these compounds? If we're right about this, we can have the first batch ready in 6 hours. But Director Thelm, we need to start with volunteers. This is completely untested, and we don't know what side effects might occur. The director's skin shifted through several colors as she processed this information. Her people were dying by the thousands every day. Traditional medicine had failed. The humans were offering hope, but it came with enormous risks. I'll be your first volunteer, she said quietly. The next 12 hours were the longest in Sarah's career. The synthesized compound, derived from Earth's evolutionary arms race between cephalopods and their parasites, was administered to Director Velnan, 50 other volunteers who had volunteered despite the risks. For the first hour, nothing happened. Then, slowly, miraculous changes began to occur. The silence's progression halted in the treated patients. Neural pathways that had been damaged began showing signs of recovery. It's working, Dr. Rodriguez reported, his voice filled with wonder. The plague is trying to adapt, but it keeps building the wrong defenses. It's like trying to fight a sword with armor designed to stop bullets. Word of the treatment's success spread quickly throughout the remaining Krillian population. Captain Steele coordinated with the human fleet to begin mass production of the compound while Dr. Chen's team worked around the clock to refine the formula. Within days, human medical ships were distributing the cure to every infected world in Krillian. Space. The silence, which had seemed unstoppable just weeks before, began retreating as millions of patients recovered their lost abilities. Director Thelman, now fully cured and back to her normal blue coloration, stood once again in the research council chambers. But this time, she wasn't alone. Representatives from dozens of worlds were returning, their fear replaced by gratitude and amazement. Dr. Chen, she said, as the human scientist prepared to depart for the next crisis that had called for Earth's help. How did you know this would work? How did a species with supposedly primitive medicine succeed where our greatest civilizations failed? Sarah smiled, the same expression that had confused the director weeks earlier, though now Thelm was beginning to understand that it represented something called hope. Director, sometimes the best solution isn't the most advanced one. Sometimes it's the one nobody else thought to try. Earth taught us that survival isn't about being the strongest or the smartest. It's about being different enough that the challenges that defeat others become opportunities for us. As the human fleet prepared to depart, carrying with them the gratitude of an entire civilization, Director Thelm realized that the galaxy had underestimated more than just human medical capabilities. They had underestimated the value of thinking differently, of approaching problems from perspectives that no one else could imagine. The plague had been designed to defeat every known form of galactic medicine. but it had never encountered the stubborn creativity of a species that had learned to survive on a world that had spent billions of years trying to kill them. In the end, humanity's greatest strength wasn't their technology or their knowledge. It was their willingness to try solutions that seemed impossible, to find hope in desperate situations, and to never give up when others said that there was no way forward. As the human ships disappeared into the same impossible fold in space-time that had brought them, the galaxy began to understand that sometimes the most powerful response to a call for help comes from the most unexpected source. The humans had answered, and in doing so, they had saved not just the Krillian Empire, but demonstrated that cooperation across the vast differences of galactic civilization could achieve miracles that no single species could accomplish alone. Asterisk.